Hey there, my name is Jonathan Creamer, and I am currently a senior front end engineer at Microsoft. This has been my dream job for my whole life, and I just wanted to take a second and introduce myself and how talk about how I got to kind of where I'm at in this dream job that I'm now living. I was fortunate enough that when I was 13, I had a good friend that saw something in me. I expressed an interest in, web and sort of internet technologies, whatever. He had a startup at the time. He was in his mid 20s, I think, and I was 13. And he's like, "Hey, I'd love to teach you the internet." And so I remember very explicitly when he came, when we went out to lunch, and he just had like a notepad, and he's like, "This is a web server, and this is how websites are built." And of course, this would have been, I don't even know, in maybe year 2001 or two or something like that. And then fast forward a few years in high school, I got to take some HTML classes where the teacher made us write everything in Notepad before we could then turn around and use it Dreamweaver. And then in college, I actually started in computer science, thinking I wanted to do more programming, but then for some reason I ended up pivoting and actually wanted to do hardware. So I actually ended up getting a degree in computer engineering, which is sort of a fun pivot actually, because I like to think about it in hindsight that I thought I wanted to write code, but then I wanted to actually do hardware stuff. I was like, I don't know that I want to sit behind a desk actually after having done some of this. But I minored in computer science and then did the engineering degree. And then as soon as I graduated with that degree, the guy that I had worked with when I was younger, who took me under his wing, actually hired me for my first gig. And so I ended up sitting behind a desk writing code. But I like that engineering degree was something that helped me sort of think problems as an engineer instead of just as like a computer science theorist. So I like to like deconstruct a problem and understand it, build something out of the scrap parts that I find, and I think it's a bit of an engineering mindset. So fast forward, a few years after I got that first gig, I picked up Cold Fusion at first. That was actually his language of choice in his startup. So it was Cold Fusion plus HTML, CSS. It was MVC Cold Fusion though, which is like a whole different type of Cold Fusion. We were using something called Coldbox, which was a way to build front end back end apps with Cold Fusion classes, CFCs. And then I ended up moving on from that startup to do Cold Fusion CMS for a company called Dealer Skins, where we did car dealership websites. A few months after I got there, though, of course, like a lot of companies did in the 2000s, they switched to ASP.NET. And a lot of the Cold Fusion developers dipped out, but I was like, I kind of like this thing. ASP.NET MVC 3 had just come out. And what's crazy, this was in 2011, 12. That was during a time when Microsoft first started going open source. So guys like Scott Henselman, Phil Hack, John Galloway, those guys were all, at Microsoft during the Ballmer era doing things that were unheard of, right? Trying to make MVC open source and all this. And so that's actually where I fell in love with Microsoft. I had also had worked at GameStop previously and had gotten an Xbox and a couple Zunes. They're actually up here somewhere on my shelf. So between that and then working in ASP.NET MVC, I was like a diehard Microsoft fan. So from that moment on, I was like, God, I hope one day, I'll get to work there. It probably never happened, but that was just sort of my developer dream. I moved on from Dealer Skins to then go do only front end at a company called Append2, which was formed out of the jQuery company. This guy, Mike Hostetler, and his friend Jonathan started that company and worked with Ralph and Elijah Manor and Alex, just all kinds of great people, Jim Cowart. And we were a great little JavaScript shop. It was 50 of us, 30 to 50 of us, all remote. First remote job. We were all on Skype. It was pretty cool before remote working was a thing. So I actually got to learn how to remote work years ago, which is why I prefer remote working, generally speaking. I've done a few office gigs, now. And I did a quick stint at a startup doing C# stuff, but then went back to Append2 and then wound up actually at Lonely Planet. Lonely Planet was a great company because I had an opportunity to go do more C# MVC stuff. But I was just, after all that years of doing JavaScript, it's like I want to stay on the front end. And this company, Lonely Planet, had reached out, and they're a big travel company, huge for backpacking, writing books for visiting the whole world. They've since been acquired by Red Ventures and are still going. But there, I was also curious to learn a little bit more about Ruby on Rails because that was their back end. And so I loved that company so much. Before I fell in love with travel, I got to travel to Oxford, actually for fulfilling a gig from Appendo after it shut down. But during that trip, I got to go to the Lonely Planet offices in London. Fell in love with London. That's why I'm always trying to go over there. It's just such a great place, springboard to other parts of Europe. And yeah, Lonely Planet was amazing. That's where I got my feet wet in React. We at first were doing kind of jQuery backbone stuff, and then when it was React like 14 into 15, that came out, and I was like, I really like this thing. This is amazing. We're going to be able to build all these components. And at the time, like, there was not a lot of React stuff in the ecosystem yet. So I just had to kind of do my best to learn and make my own stuff. And our little team at Lonely Planet was never huge, 15, 20 engineers at the time. And so I built sort of what I thought at the time, in hindsight, was actually some pretty cutting edge stuff. We took our Ruby on Rails stuff, and I was like, I want to try some Node. And thankfully, some of our DevOps guys were really great with Docker. And so they helped me spin up some Node apps. And then I built some front-end or server-side rendered React components. And then we did some infinite scrolling type stuff on the front end where we server-side rendered it and then dynamically loaded more as it went on. It was really, really great. And then all of a sudden, between that and working on like the design system of Eventbrite, or excuse me, that's next, Lonely Planet, I fell in love with tooling and realized that I really like doing front-end tooling as a thing, because obviously React requires transpiling with Babel, and then you get into Webpack and all that stuff, and I was like, I actually kind of like this tooling stuff. And so I ended up building really a lot of the tools at Lonely Planet that everybody else used to build the site. And then I met this guy Ben Alegbodu doing some conference speaking, because I kind of got into speaking conferences early on there. In like 2011, I did user groups and then conferences. But when I was at Lonely Planet, I wanted to talk about all this cool React rendering stuff I was doing. So I spoke a lot about that and met Ben, who was speaking a lot too that year. I think 3 conferences we met at in this year. I think it was like 2013, 2014, or maybe actually 2018. And he told me about Eventbrite. And this company, Eventbrite, was actually hiring for a team to do tooling. And I was like, a team that does front-end tooling, front-end infrastructure only? That's amazing. So I got to full-time go jump over into roles that was only in front-end tooling, which was incredible. I didn't even know that was like a thing. And so I loved that job a ton too. I got to do tons of cool stuff there, building out, working with the Eventbrite design system, EDS, and we did a lot of cool front-end infrastructure stuff, working with Python. There was like a big Python app, but then our front end like snuck in the middle of it, and we built a monorepo with Jamie Kyle, and me and Kyle Welch and Jamie built this awesome monorepo, and that's where I fell in love with monorepo tooling. We did a lot of really great work there, and then after a few years of being there, COVID hit and we all went remote. And I was still loving Eventbrite, but obviously that wasn't, it was a tough time there. But what was amazing, I got reached out to finally after all these years by Microsoft. I had written some cool blog posts about stuff we did at Eventbrite, and someone at Microsoft, Alex Pope, read my blog on monorepos and said, hey, we should get Jonathan to come work for us at Microsoft. And it was just such a shock to me to find out that like I was actually finally getting to do the thing I wanted to do for all these years ago. And they sought me out, and I got to stay here in Nashville. This was 2021, so here I am about a month away from 3 years at Microsoft. And now I'm doing front-end monorepo tooling for Microsoft. We have a monorepo called One.js. It's got about 900 to 1,000 active monthly users, many, many millions of lines of code that supports Office engineers building front ends for, Word, PowerPoint, Excel, and that's where I'm at right now. It's been such an awesome opportunity. I work with people, a team of about 50 engineers from all over the world, literally. So from Redmond to Nashville to Canada to Oslo, Africa, India. We have this V team that I get to work with. This just incredible group of diversity, all kinds of backgrounds and stories, which is part of the reason I want to start doing, more of these kinds of videos where it's like I want to talk about my background, and I'd love to talk about other developers' backgrounds, because we all have a story. We all have a developer story. We all started somewhere. We all had a journey, and it's important to never forget the journey that you have taken. I look back on some amazing moments of my life, and I just want to share that with people, and I want everybody to share their story. Um, so yeah, that's me. Can't recommend blogging enough too. I started a blog along the way, which is like how I landed, the role I'm in now. It's just however you feel like you can communicate with what's going on in here, just expressing whatever's going on in your mind outwardly in some form or fashion, whether or not it's doing stuff like this with video or a blog or just talking to somebody. I just can't encourage you enough to just get those feelings out, get your story out. This week I was prepping, an intro to TypeScript talk for some folks. And, even just going back, like I've been doing TypeScript for years, but doing something like that helps reinforce the knowledge that most of the conference talks that I give start as like a blog post that I wrote. And really the way I write blog posts is so that I can write down something cool that I did that is inevitably actually just for me to make sure that I know that thing and share it, because I don't know how many times I've wound up Googling for a problem and found a blog post I wrote. And then you just never know who also might be having the same problem as you, and then your blog post helps them out too. So anyways, that's me. Feel free to subscribe to the YouTube channel and follow me on all the socials. I'm jcreamer898 and basically Jonathan Creamer everywhere. I've been lucky enough to kind of own that on Google and Bing. So thanks, appreciate it.